Well, we're over halfway through the year, and I just wanted to do an update on what I've been reading this year. I just hit my reading goal for the year, which was 20 books for the entire year, but I hit it early. I hit it this month in August. I know 20 books to some really intense book readers might not seem like a lot, but for me, having gone from literally over a year ago not reading anything ever and not really having a reading goal or enjoying to read in my adult life, going from nothing to 20 books for the first full year of reading is pretty significant for me. So I encourage you, if you don't like reading or whatever, I totally get it. I was there too. I'm assuming you probably wouldn't be watching this video if you didn't enjoy reading, but if you feel like I don't know where to start or whatever, I have some good suggestions for you here today. I'll give you a whole breakdown on what I've read so far this year, what I've liked, what I didn't like, and yeah, so let's get into the video. The first book I read this year was The Tao of Pooh. I did do a video about this earlier in the year. I will link it above so you can go and watch that for a little bit of a fresh review, like right after I had read it. This book was published in 1982 by Benjamin Hoff. I gave it about a 4.5 stars. I did like it. I think it's a good intro to Taoism through the character of Winnie the Pooh. And it's a little bit of like a philosophical sort of positive spin on life and seeing the best in life and nature and connecting with nature because we are nature. So I thought it was a really good book, kind of a sweet, like I said, told through Winnie the Pooh. So it's got that sweet kind of easy stories to read through. It's a quick read. It's only like 150 pages, something like that. Then on to my second book. I do have a physical copy of this book called Utopia Avenue. So a little backstory on why I picked up this book in the first place was that when I originally started getting into reading about a year ago, the first book that I read, and it really got me into reading, was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But a lot of people who read and liked that book said that if you like that book, you will like Utopia Avenue. So I did ask my husband for this for Christmas last year, and he got it for me. This was published in 2020 by David Mitchell. It's a historical fiction about a band in the UK in like the 60s. It has a lot of references to other rock and roll stars at the time, like David Bowie, and I'm trying to remember who else, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, people like that. Personally, I found it to be a little cheesy or whatever, a little corny at certain points. It just felt like very heavy-handed in the references, which maybe some people like. I thought it was a little goofy. And when I started reading this book, I really enjoyed it, but I have to tell you the reason I only gave it a 3 stars, which I feel like was maybe a little generous. I think the story wasn't all bad, but here's my problem with the book. So each chapter in this book is kind of broken down by different characters. So each chapter kind of goes back and forth between the different band members in Utopia Avenue is the band name, if I didn't say that, which is not necessarily what I had a problem with, except for the fact that I thought the book would be a little bit more about the band and the dynamics of the band a little bit more, not so much. It was kind of each chapter was sort of each individual band member and their experiences outside of the band, not so much having anything to do with the band itself. It really has very little to do with the band. It's kind of all of their individual stories. And then what happens to the band is kind of a sort of a byproduct of each of their stories, if that makes sense. So I guess I was expecting a little bit more of the band dynamics, things like that. Another part of this book that I didn't really care for was the author, David Mitchell. I found out he has kind of a character, I think, that goes like a thread that goes through a lot of his other books that he tied into this one. One of the characters' name, I think his name was Jasper. Jasper has like a Jekyll and Hyde personality, and he's got like a little voice talking to him or something, which would sound interesting. And but each of his chapters I found very, very difficult to read and get through, and I dreaded every time they came up because I had no clue what was going on, and it just was a weird addition to the story that I just didn't feel like was necessary. And it got a little like sci-fi almost in a weird way with that. So there was a weird, I don't know. If you like David Mitchell books and you understand that character and that through line with his books, maybe you would like it. But having no idea what was going on, I found it to be a bit odd. Being generous by saying 3 stars, but I didn't really care for this book, and it's quite a hefty book. So I don't know, unless you're really into maybe 60s rock and roll band sort of vibe, this could be for you, but I also don't think it had the most satisfying conclusion, not gonna lie. So I don't know. This was kind of a no for me. And this next book I read has to be one of my favorites out of the books I've read so far this year, and that is I Who Have Never Known Men, published in 1995 from Jacqueline Hartman. It has been kind of a popular book to talk about in the past year. It's kind of interesting how books sometimes randomly, I don't know, kind of get big, like out of nowhere, it feels like. So I don't know what was the catalyst for this book kind of coming back, since it was published like 30 years ago. But if you don't know, the story is about this group of women who are trapped in a bunker underground. Something happens and they're able to escape, luckily, and but they have really no idea why they were down there. They have very, very vague, fuzzy memory of what life was before, and the main character especially really has no memory. She's pretty much, it seems like, grown up in this prison, and so a lot of her actions really are informed by this weird dystopian life that she's living. It's sort of a sci-fi, it's hard to almost describe it as a sci-fi, but you just really don't, like, there's really no, I will say, spoiler a little bit. If you like a pretty bow on the end of your story and a satisfying conclusion and like a perfect, you know, answer to the end of your book, this is probably not the book for you. I've seen a lot of people criticize this book for that exact reason. It does not give you a satisfying, pretty packaged, here's your answer. But the reason I liked it and I gave it 5 stars was that I think part of what makes this book really good and interesting is partially Jacqueline Hartman's own experience as a Jewish person fleeing from Europe, from the Holocaust at the time. I think that just really informs the story, and it kind of, I think is sort of part of the point of the story. And there's an afterword in, I think, one of the newer editions of this book. There's an afterword by Sophie McIntosh where she breaks down like kind of why this book is and why the ending is the way it is, and I think that really sums it up in a really nice way. So definitely get the version with Sophie McIntosh, her blurb at the end. It's great. I feel like she perfectly sums up like what this book is about in like a couple of pages at the very end, so definitely read that. But like I said, if you want a satisfying conclusion and an answer to, you know, the end of your story, then maybe that's not for you. I think that's kind of what makes the book so good, is the kind of not knowing, and the unsatisfying conclusion to me is the answer. So I also think I made a video on this earlier in the year, so if you want to go watch that, I'll link that up above as well. Next book on my list is Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. I think that's how you pronounce his name, hopefully. It is a biography from 1996 about Chris McCandless, who also went by the name Alexander Supertramp. If you don't know, this book obviously came out kind of a while ago, and they did make it into a movie, but I will say, I don't think the movie's as good as the book. You might have seen the movie because it was pretty popular when it came out at the time. But basically the biography talks about this young guy who graduated from college, gave away all of his earthly belongings, and just kind of ventured into the wilderness, hitchhiked, got random odd jobs, and eventually decided he wanted to go to the Alaskan wilderness and just kind of live off the land. Unfortunately, it didn't end so well for him. He did end up dying because he was super unprepared. But Jon Krakauer, I think, does a great job of tracking down all of his story, all the people he kind of met along the way, and kind of piecing together what happened, because really nobody knew. He just kind of was bouncing around random places through the US, hitchhiking everywhere. It was a really interesting story. There were some parts of the book that Jon Krakauer kind of told his own experiences and other experiences of people who had kind of ventured into the wilderness and disappeared or died. And that part to me was like, didn't really add too much to the story for me, but nonetheless, I think the story of Chris McCandless was very fascinating and interesting to read. I understand a lot of people's criticism about books like this, talking about, especially I feel like men who kind of decide like, I want to live off the wilderness, I want to be a wilderness man. I get the criticism of like, they think they can conquer something that is unconquerable, and they get a little delusional and do things that are dumb and end up dying, and I totally understand not wanting to romanticize that. I get the criticism, however, I do think this is kind of an interesting story. I do recommend it. I gave it a 4 stars. I enjoyed the book. Like I said, I watched the movie. The movie is not as good as the book, as tends to be the case, right? But it was still an enjoyable read, and I recommend it if you haven't read it already. And this next book I listened to on audio, actually. I saw the book in a bookstore, and I was like, that seems like an interesting book. I'm gonna look it up, and I got it from the library, got it from Libby, and listened to it. I would be interested to actually get a physical copy of the book, maybe read through it, but this book is called White Rural Rage. It's 2024. It's kind of a political science book. So it basically breaks down the kind of uptick in rural areas, voting much more and more Republican/MAGA, and how that kind of ends up hurting them more than it does helping them, which I thought was very interesting. It had a lot of stories and statistics about how people kind of vote against their own self-interest. So that was very fascinating. I highly recommend it. And next up is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, published in 2020. Kind of a sort of sci-fi book, I guess you could say, about this girl who is kind of suicidal, and she ends up in this midnight library where she's kind of seeing all these different possible lives that she could live, and is sort of given the opportunity like to see into each of these lives, but she realizes her own life was kind of the most satisfying version of her life. So kind of this appreciation of what you have and not what you don't. I think this is great. I think I gave it a 4 stars out of 5. I would like to reread this. When I was reading this, I was kind of distracted with other things going on in my life, so I wasn't able to give it like my full attention. So at some point I would like to reread this, because I think I just kind of started skimming through because I was getting frustrated that I was reading it so slowly. I do love Matt Haig's writing. I read The Life Impossible last year. I think his writing has gotten a lot better. However, I did like this book, so 4 out of 5. And next up, I think I have a fond memory of this book because I got to read it while I lounged by the pool and drank cocktails because I was on vacation in Florida. The next book is The Song of Achilles. This was published in 2011 by Madeline Miller. It's a historical fiction about Achilles, obviously, and the Trojan War romance, LGBTQ romance book between Achilles and Patroclus. There were aspects to this book that I didn't love. I didn't love, the beginning felt a little slow. The longer I went on, it definitely got better. So I do recommend this book. I also gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Not perfect, but an enjoyable read nonetheless. So if you haven't already read this, I know this book, like I said, is from 2011, which I was surprised. I didn't realize quite how old this book was, but I really enjoyed it. So we have a lot of LGBTQ books this year that I've read so far, but I did like this. This is a book I honestly would potentially consider rereading as well. The writing was really good. It's a pretty easy read, so I do recommend this. And next up is a book written by a Nashville author. It's Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, published in 2023. It's kind of a romance fiction book. This mom is telling her daughters about this romance she had with a famous actor back when she was younger, and she was in a play in a small town in Michigan. I'm not gonna lie, I get why people like this book. However, I did not love it, and neither did my husband. We both tried to read this book, just really didn't enjoy it. I will say I did start by reading the physical version, which I ended up giving to my mother-in-law because she loves Ann Patchett. It's one of her favorite books. I don't know, maybe this book was too slow. I don't know what it was about this book. I couldn't get into it. I didn't like it. Like I said, I started reading the physical copy and transitioned to the audiobook because Meryl Streep reads it also, and I love Meryl Streep's voice. I did end up giving it only a 3 stars out of 5. I see why people like it. It just wasn't for me. I even wrote that in my review. I was like, not my cup of tea. It's kind of a little bit of a slow burn if you like slow pace. I don't mind slow, but this to me was it was slow in a way that was just also not interesting to me. I hate to say it, but so I didn't really care for this book. Like I said, I get why people like it. It's very romantic and slow, and it has some nicely, beautifully written parts to the book. It was not my thing. So I don't know if that review is helpful, but for me, it was a no. I am, however, willing to reread other Ann Patchett books. I do have Commonwealth, I think is the book name, and I really want to read The Dutch House, so we'll see. At some point, I'll get around to reading more of her books. I just didn't care for Tom Lake. Maybe I'll read it again someday in the future, but it just wasn't for me, quite frankly. So, and this next book is a little bit of a change from the other books that I've read so far this year, and that is 2 Weeks Notice by Amy Porterfield. Had no intention of reading this book. However, my aunt sent it to me in the mail because she really wants me to start my own business and be an entrepreneur. So she sent this to me because she read it and she really enjoyed it. I did start reading it, but I ended up switching to the audio as well on this because I figured it would kind of take me too long to get through if I didn't just listen to the audio. This is like a self-help business book, but it's definitely like geared more towards women and kind of pushing yourself to not make excuses and, you know, just do the thing, start the business, start messy, don't waste your time on like frivolous things and whatever. I will say though, I went to business school, I have a business degree, and there's nothing wrong with this book. I just don't feel like it's any different or unique compared to pretty much any other business book out there or self-help book like this. I don't think it was giving me any groundbreaking details or anything like that. I do like that it's geared towards women and helping women, especially with like kids and, you know, all the chaos going on in your life, like helping them get organized and figure out how to do what they want and be independent and accomplish the things they want to accomplish. I like the idea, what it's promoting. However, I just don't think it was anything super unique, like most business books, sorry to say. Can you hear my neighbors? The next series of books on my list are definitely some of my favorite that I've read this year. I was shocked at how much I enjoyed them and love them, and that is of course the series The Hunger Games. This is my first time ever reading the series in my life. My mom bought me the original series trilogy, and I just never read them. I was a Twilight girl when I was in middle school, high school. At the time, I don't know why, I was very like, this is my franchise, Twilight's my franchise, and I don't care about any other franchise. Like, I didn't like Harry Potter, and I didn't like Hunger Games or any of that. I just was all about Twilight. I like refused to read these for a long time, and then when the movies came out, I also refused to watch those until like a few years ago. I think was the first time I'd ever seen the movies. But honestly, I'm glad I got to read these as an adult and really appreciate them. I think they're so good, so well written. The first 3 are so good. I read the first book, I think in like 4 or 5 days maybe, which maybe doesn't seem like crazy to a lot of people, but for me that's pretty fast because this book is just so good. I think I have to say, I think this one out of the original trilogy, the first book, has to be one of my favorites. Catching Fire is a close second. Mockingjay was good. I thought it was a little slow at parts, but it was interesting too. Mockingjay surprisingly was the most different, I think, from the movie. They changed a lot of stuff, which was interesting to kind of see how they changed it and put it into the movie. I'm sure a lot of you know what the story is about, but it's kind of a dystopian world where children are reaped for the Hunger Games, which is basically they just go in a arena and kill each other, to put it bluntly. Even though these are considered like young adult novels, they are so well written, they're so good to read. I will say also what was interesting about these books was a lot of people always talk about the love triangle between Peeta and Katniss and Gale. I found that to be like such a minor detail, and I did see somebody say, I don't know where I saw this, but I saw somebody say that like, if the only thing you got out of these books was this love triangle thing, then you missed the complete point of the book. And I was like, I totally agree, because to me that is such a minor detail in these books, and everything else about it is so much better than the romance. To me, the romance is like so secondary and not important at all compared to other aspects of this book. I think even in Catching Fire at one point, Katniss, because Gale is trying to like get out of her, like, so what's the deal? Like, you like Peeta, you like me? And she says, I remember, she says, ever since Prim, her sister, got raped in the Hunger Games, all she can think about is how scared she is. And she was like, I don't have room to think about anything else. And I was like, that is so perfect. Like, I think it's just, she is so scared. There just gets more and more pressure on her as the books go on. So it's just really like such a secondary plot point to the story. It doesn't really matter. And like I said, I think the rest of the book is just so much more interesting than the love story. So I don't know. I love these books. I thought they were great. But this is unfortunately where Suzanne Collins lost me, because I then read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This, in my opinion, and I will get so much hate for this, This is the worst book in the series by far. It follows more of President Snow, so it's not told from his perspective, it's more of a third-person perspective, and talking about I think it was the 10th Hunger Games when he was a student in school, and his involvement and things like that. While I think the history and the backstory to the Hunger Games was interesting, and Snow himself, I just didn't really care for this book. I thought it was a little bit too much fan service. Like, I don't know, I just didn't think her writing to me wasn't as good in this book either. Suzanne Collins, I just thought this one, in my opinion, is just the worst in the series. It's really bad. I only gave this, by the way, I gave all the Hunger Games, these first books, I pretty much give like 5 stars. They're fantastic. This one, I gave like a 3. I understand its role in the series. I just didn't really care for the story. I really didn't like this book. It was so hard to get through. I really hated it. And to be quite honest, I thought the movie was really bad too. I think this book is it's so dense, and like there's just so much detail. I remember even like my husband was asking me like, so what's going on in the book? And I would try to explain to him and I just couldn't, because it was just, there's so much little BS shit that's just happening all the time in this book that is just like so hard to explain to anybody. Like, try explaining this book to somebody who's never read The Hunger Games. It's just not my favorite. I don't love this book. I kind of regret even buying it. I hate to say that. I bought it because I had the first 3, and then I went out and bought this in Sunrise on the Reaping, and I did not like this book, but whatever, we'll move on. But then luckily, she did it. She brought it back, and she nailed it with Sunrise on the Reaping. I love Haymitch's character. I love that she did a story just about Haymitch. I know a lot of people did criticize this book just because I think the big criticism is that it's just another telling of the Hunger Games, but I hate to say it, I think that is kind of the most interesting part of the series, is kind of everybody's experiences and like how everybody sort of tolerated the games for so long. I love this book. She really came back after this. She came back and she did it. This book is so good. I love Haymitch as a character. I also love Maisie Donner, who's another girl he is in the Reaping with for the games, and she is just that bitch, and I love her so much, and I can't wait for this book to come to life in the movie. They're currently filming, and I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to reread this before the movie comes out next year, because I really love this book. Highly recommend. I just highly recommend all of this series. Unfortunately, I will say, you do have to read Ballad. I feel like it's not like totally hinges on Sunrise on the Reaping, but it definitely helps your understanding of the history, so I would recommend reading all of them, even though I didn't love Ballad. It has its place in the series, unfortunately, so you gotta acknowledge it as canon, I guess. Oh, and this one I also gave like a 5 stars, so if that wasn't obvious by the way I'm talking about the book. My next couple of books are both recent books and LGBTQ. The next one is Harriet Tubman Live in Concert. This is this year, 2025, by Bob the Drag Queen. It's kind of a historical fiction. Harriet Tubman and a lot of other historical figures come back to life in present day. I don't remember what the main character's name was again in the book, but they basically help Harriet Tubman. She wants to make this kind of like soul, well, maybe not soul, but like hip-hop, R&B sort of album to kind of talk about her life. But I only gave this book like a 3.5 stars. I love Bob the Drag Queen, but this book to me just, I listened to it on audio. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was kind of to me. I thought it could have used a lot more detail. I just thought there was like more to be desired in the book. I just thought it was kind of ended abruptly. It just felt like it could have had more detail. I think the concept of the book is like really interesting, of these like historical figures coming back to life. I just felt like it was a little short. I listened to this on audio, and there were 2 songs that Bob had made as like Harriet Tubman's songs for the book for her concert. That was really interesting, really cool. I think it's like one of the first times I've listened to a book and there's been songs that paired with it, I guess. So that was really cool that Bob made like these 2 songs for his book. I thought that was really cool. And next up is Atmosphere, also released this year by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's a historical fiction kind of romance book about 2 female astronauts who work at NASA. They fall in love, and then there's kind of an issue that goes wrong on the spaceship that one of the ladies is on. She has to try to get back and save her crew from dying in space, and then the other astronaut has to help them get back as well. Will say this book was not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I want to say if I had to rank them, I would say Daisy Jones obviously is my favorite. I read Evelyn Hugo last year as well. I would put that above there, and then I would put Atmosphere. Don't get me wrong, I love her writing, and I think her books, she's really good at writing historical fiction. So I do think it's worth a read. It is just a little bit slower paced, I think, than some of her other books. So I found it a little slow at times. It was still a good book, and I do recommend it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And I have another audiobook, Yes Please by Amy Poehler. This book came out in 2014. I've been listening to Amy Poehler's podcast recently, and I just was like, I just forgot how much I love Amy Poehler, so let me listen to her book. It was really funny, kind of a autobiography, but also just comedic, like little like life lessons, but told in a very funny comedic way. I love Amy Poehler. Gave it a 4 out of 5. It is an autobiography. I do think autobiographies can be a bit like, especially comedy autobiographies can kind of all seem the same. I do like hers. If you like Amy Poehler, if you like listening to her podcast, I think you'll enjoy it. She just has like kind of funny stories, and I don't know, I just love Amy Poehler. So, and this book I found like super cheap at the thrift store, and it's a classic, so I thought I would just give it a read because I don't think I ever read it in school. And that is The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Obviously this is like kind of an adventure novel. It's about a dog who gets stolen and they get shipped off to like the gold rush in Alaska, and there's a lot of, I will say, like animal abuse and neglect in this book. So if that is not up your alley, I totally understand. I didn't love that aspect of this book. However, I don't know, in the historical context, I'm like, I'm not saying I get it, but I get it. You know, this is like considered a classic, so I thought I would give it a shot and read it. It's also really short. It's like 130 pages or something like that, so I thought I would give it a read. It's hard to give this a rating. My problem with Jack London is the like romanticizing of the primordial beast is a little weird. So I don't like love that aspect. I don't think you have to like strip down, you know, to your bare self and like beat yourself down and live in the wilderness to like understand our meaning in life. So I don't know, I didn't really like that aspect of this book. If you're into classics, you know, this is an easy read. It's quick. So if you're into reading classic books, I guess I recommend it, but other than that, it's a skip for me, I guess. I don't know even why I felt the need to read it. I just did. Okay, we're getting towards the end. I have 3 more books to talk about and we'll be done. But I have to talk about one of my least favorite books this year, and that is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. Man, oh man, I did not enjoy this book whatsoever. It started off fine, but then it just kind of I don't know, it lost me. This was published in 2019. This book is about a woman of color named Amira. Somebody accuses her of kidnapping the kid she's babysitting, who is white. And then the mother of the kid she's babysitting, I think, is trying to prove herself to Amira that like she's not racist. And then Amira starts dating a guy who the mother used to date in high school. It's all very complicated. And then they have this like who's less racist off thing, trying to prove themselves to Amira. But to me, this book just is not very well written. There's just weird parts to this book that just lost me, and there were so many moments where I wish I had just put it down and not finished it because I just really didn't like it that much. There's one part where Amira is talking about, she's debating quitting her job, and she says something about the tea bags that she has in her purse make her think about quitting her job. And I'm like, what? What, tea bags? And I told my husband that, and he was like, well, did they talk about that in any other part of the book? And I was like, if they did, it was so insignificant that I have no memory of it, because I have no idea. Like, I read that and I was like, what are we talking about? And then at the end, Amira is supposed to have this moment, like a gotcha moment and like stick it to the man moment. And her whole dialogue is just, like, yeah, okay. That's her whole dialogue. That's what you're going to give your main character, her moment to shine, and you give her, yeah, like, okay. It was so bad. I was like, you couldn't even give her one moment? It just was so, one moment to be like, boom, you know? This is a no from me, dog. Don't even bother. It's not worth reading. And it just, when I finished this book, it put me in a bad mood. I still did give it a 2 stars. I think it could have been good, and it started off promising. It just ended really, really badly. I totally forgot about another book. I totally forgot to write this down. But a book I'll just quickly throw in here is this Lucy Foley book, The Paris Apartment. I got this for my husband for Christmas because he really likes Lucy Foley books. I read this. I gave it like, I think a 4-ish stars, something like that. It's about this apartment complex where this guy lives and he's sort of investigating the people who live there because everything's very sussy, and it ends up being a little bit of a murder mystery. The author she said that the movie Rear Window was like an inspiration for this book, which I do love. The Rear Window, that's one of my favorite movies, so I did like that aspect of this book. However, I thought the solution to this book was a little bit of a letdown. Just wasn't that, like, it was a little anticlimactic. So other than that, it was good. It was an enjoyable read. I had moments where I was like, oh, you know, like a little spooky. If you really like Lucy Foley, maybe you'll like this. She does do, like, each of the chapters is pretty much like a different character kind of telling their POV. So that is kind of an interesting, I like when authors kind of do different things to, like, keep you interested, keep you guessing, keep the book interesting and entertaining. And the last book I'll talk about in this video is a book that I actually just finished yesterday. I saw people raving about it and talking about it so much that I just had to get it from the library and check it out myself. Was A Psalm for the Wild-Built. It's a short book, so I figured it would be an easy, quick read. I took my time with it, but it's still an easy book to get through. It's a sci-fi book about a monk and a robot who run into each other, and the monk character is trying to find out like what the meaning of life is, and the robot kind of helps him like realize the positive spin, not having to put pressure on yourself to feel like you always have to have like this specific purpose and things like that. So it was a really good book. It's a quick read. I'm super excited to read the second book to this series. It's so well written. Becky Chambers really built a whole universe in 150 pages. It is so well written, very detailed, beautiful. Like, I almost wish there was like a graphic novel aspect to this book, because it's just the details of the world is so interesting. I would love to see it like drawn or like come to life in a movie or something, even though I don't know how well it would do in a movie, but like it's so good. The world that she built was amazing. So I gave this a 5 stars. I thought it was really great. Easy read, like I said. So I highly recommend this, The Song for the Wild-Built. And I'll tell you quickly what my next read is, since I have it right here. It's The Great Big Beautiful Life, The Great BBL, as I like to call it, by Emily Henry. This book also just came out in 2025. Emily Henry writes cutesy like romance books, so I thought I would give it a read. I did enjoy People We Meet on Vacation. I read that at the end of last year. It was kind of cute and funny. It wasn't my favorite, but it was pretty good, so I was willing to try another one of her books. This one is hefty. I just started. I'm only like a couple pages in. Super excited to read this too. But yeah, that's everything I've read so far for the year. I think A Psalm for the Wild-Built and maybe The Hunger Games and Sunrise on the Reapings, I think, are some of my favorite that I've read so far this year. If you want my top picks, those are my top number ones of the year. And I would say Such a Fun Age is by far the worst. But thanks for watching my breakdown of everything I've read so far this year. Maybe I'll do another update at the end of the year. I think my total goal, now that I've hit 20, I think my next goal will maybe be like 25 or 30 books. We'll see if we can get there. Thanks for watching everything I've read this year, and let me know what your favorite book that you've read this year so far, and I'll see you next time.